Hey class, so before I see you on Saturday, I hope that you have a chance to take a listen and a look at this video. So what I have here is a standout Harrison Bergeron response. I've done my best in responding to all of your first drafts of this assignment and some of your second drafts. Even if I'm not responding to your third or fourth drafts of these Harrison Bergeron responses, please do keep working on them. And I hope that this video serves as another way in which you can sort of look at your newer drafts and see if you're on the right track or if there's something that you're still missing. So let's read this first paragraph together. In the first paragraph of Harrison Bergeron, Kurt Vonnegut uses the simplicity literary technique to illustrate how everyone in the year 2081 was equal. He demonstrates this device by the repetition of the first and last words in a clause over successive clauses of the words. By writing, nobody was smarter than anybody else, nobody was better looking than anybody else, nobody was stronger, quicker than anybody else, he makes me feel the oppressiveness that this mandated conformity imposed on its citizenry. Vonnegut establishes for the reader the tone that is maintained throughout this story. So, what do I appreciate about this first paragraph? Well, first, I appreciate that from the very beginning, I know what literary technique I am going to be hearing about. Some of you have been saying, there are many literary techniques used in the first paragraph, and then go on to say, for example, simplicity is used. I appreciate the want to have a sort of very general introductory statement, but for exam writing, it's always best that your introductory sentence does more than just give a general idea of what the paragraph is talking about. It's best that it also addresses something within the prompt. So just for your own note, introductory sentence should address the prompt, not in a general way, but in a direct answer. So if the prompt asks you to identify two literary devices that are being used in Harrison Bergeron, your introductory sentence should identify those two literary techniques. If the prompt is asking whether or not you agree or disagree with an article written by Ben Carson, your introductory sentence should say explicitly whether you agree or disagree. General introductory sentences that really just sort of handhold and ease the reader into your overall paper, it's better left for the traditional college research paper, not for an exam response. Okay. The other thing that I really appreciate about this response is Harrison Bergeron is in quotes, which is perfect, right? That's the title of the story. Kurt Vonnegut is the author. So the author is being referenced, which is perfect. It's tricky sometimes if the name of the story or the name of the text is a name of a person. It sometimes gets tricky and you might want to say, well, this person is doing A, B, and C. This is the title, this is the author. So it's important to note that. Additionally, I like that the method this student uses is identify the literary technique, present the definition of the literary technique, show an example of the literary technique, and analyze the impact of this example. So you'll see when we get the example of the nobody clauses, right? Without having some sort of explanation, we're not sure why that matters, right? Why does it matter that there's repetition of nobody and anybody else here? And so it's through that he makes me feel the oppressiveness that this mandated conformity imposed on its citizenry, that we understand that the simplicity here is being used to oppress not only the characters but the reader's feeling when they're reading the text. And then the second thing that the student does that's great is she explains what's happening or she explains the impact of this line, and then she also connects what's happening in this line to the larger story when she says this is something that establishes the tone for the whole entire story. So again, we have a specific example from the text, an explanation of that, the impact of that specific example, and then a connection that that example has to the overall story. I think that's a really great pattern that you can follow, not just when you're talking about literary techniques, but you can easily transform this into a pattern to use when you have to respond to logos or pathos or ethos, right? Identify what's being used, logos, pathos, or ethos. Define what kind of logos, pathos, or ethos. So is it observation? Is it testimony? Is it humor? Is it credible because it's from a newspaper, right? So explaining, defining the logos, pathos, and ethos, giving the example, right? And then explaining or analyzing the impact that example has on the overall piece, the overall article. Okay, then we have the second paragraph. When Vonnegut introduces us to the protagonist by using the metaphor Harrison's appearance was Halloween and hardware, I instantly envision a 7-foot tall teenager who is simultaneously menacing and comical. The clown from Stephen King's novel It comes to mind, combined with scrap metal, weights, and hand tools. The reader is positioned to feel sorry for a 14-year-old who has to endure such a hardship. So again, and I would say that this first paragraph is stronger than the second paragraph, but the second paragraph is still good because it's sort of following the same formula, right? We don't necessarily have the definition of what a metaphor is, but we still understand that the impact of this metaphor for the reader is that they envision, the it, and they envision, metal, and because of these images, they feel sorry for this character. What would make this paragraph stronger is if they connected this feeling sorry for this character with what happens, right? I think it's interesting to say that you feel sorry for Harrison when we know what happens to him in the end. And I wonder if you could make the case that the reason why um, we get this imagery here, and we have this metaphor with Halloween and hardware, is so that we feel more bad for him than anything else. And also, the idea of Halloween and hardware makes you think of, or at least hardware makes you think of manipulation, right? Of machinery. And so thinking about the way in which that machinery metaphor can be applied to what's happening in the overall text. So hopefully this is helpful for all of you in re-looking at your Harrison Bergeron response. For now, starting, I would say, later on this evening, I'm going to be looking for your revised or your updated Ben Carson letters. So do look for my feedback on that tomorrow evening, and I will see you Saturday. Have a good one.